We live under the illusion that history is a completed puzzle. We visit museums, peer through glass cases, and convince ourselves that the past has been excavated, labelled, and explained. We think we know the story of humanity, but in the dim basements of universities and the dusty archives of the Middle East, there exists the world's largest library, and it is not made of paper, nor is it written in ink. It is made of clay. Hundreds of thousands of cuneiform tablets sit in silence. They are not hidden by complex codes, nor are they buried beneath the unreachable depth of a pyramid. They are right in front of us. Yet, they remain mute. Why? Because the skill to read them, to decipher the complex wedge-shaped strokes of ancient Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian, is a dying art held by only a handful of experts worldwide. Consider the irony. We are the most technologically advanced generation to ever walk the earth, yet we're sitting on a massive, unread data archive from the cradle of civilization. If this treasury of human experience has been physically sitting on shelves for decades, why has so little of it entered our modern consciousness? What if these aren't just relics, but raw, unprocessed data files waiting for an operating system capable of decoding them? Imagine a vast, shadowy archive. Endless rows of shelves stretch into the darkness, packed with palm-sized squares of hardened earth. A hand reaches out, brushing centuries of dust from a jagged surface. As the camera zooms in, the microscopic marks, the wedges, begin to look less like ancient carving and more like the binary code of a forgotten age. Then, a shift. The scene cuts to a modern screen. An AI interface pulses with light, scanning the clay. Suddenly, lines of ancient text flicker into existence, translating the thoughts of a person who lived 5,000 years ago. This is not just about a single artifact. It is about a civilization that left behind a digital-like footprint in mud, and for millennia, we have only been scratching the surface. To understand this archive, we must understand the technology. Around the late 4th millennium BCE, in the fertile crescent of Mesopotamia, humanity underwent a cognitive revolution. People began pressing reed styluses into soft, wet clay. They didn't just record myths, they recorded reality. They tracked every grain of barley, every head of cattle, and every tax payment. They recorded legal disputes, complex astronomical observations, medical prescriptions, curses, love letters, and desperate prayers. These tablets are the world's first hard drives, but they are superior to paper. Paper rots, parchment tears, papyrus turns to dust. Clay, however, is resilient. Paradoxically, the very disasters that destroyed these ancient cities, the fires that razed the palaces and temples of Nineveh and Babylon, are what immortalized their records. The flames baked the clay into ceramic stone, turning ephemeral administrative notes into permanent, indestructible data. A single tablet, no larger than a human palm, is a compressed snapshot of a life. It could be an insurance contract, a list of food rations for temple workers, or a fragment of an epic poem. Entire empires, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, did not just leave behind ruins, they left behind a hyperdense system of documentation. Picture the scene. An ancient scribe sits in the shadow of a towering ziggurat, stylus in hand, meticulously pressing information into the earth. The landscape transitions, the temple fades, and the clay transforms into a glowing modern data node. We are looking at the foundation of human administration, but this abundance is also our greatest challenge. There is simply too much clay and not enough human eyes. The scale of the archive is a mountain we cannot climb on our own. Until now. So, if we possess this monumental library, why does the history of Mesopotamia remain so shrouded in mystery? The problem is not a lack of interest, it is a crisis of logistics. We are facing an archaeological bottleneck. The 500,000 tablets currently held in global collections are not pristine, complete scrolls. They're a nightmare of preservation. Cuneiform is not a simple alphabet. A single sign can represent a syllable, a word, or a complex concept, shifting meaning based entirely on context. To make matters worse, time has been cruel to these records. The vast majority of tablets are broken, missing corners, eroded by moisture, or shattered into hundreds of pieces. To an archaeologist, a single tablet is a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces are spread across museums on different continents. Two fragments of the same royal decree might be separated by an ocean, sitting in different archives, unrecognized by human curators for over a century. The reality is grueling. A dedicated scholar might spend weeks, months, or even years meticulously cleaning, documenting, and transcribing a single group of texts. Meanwhile, the sheer volume of material awaiting attention is overwhelming. We are looking at a history book that has been shredded into hundreds of thousands of pieces, written in a language that only a few hundred people on the planet can fluently read. It is a race against time and entropy, and frankly, we are losing. Imagine the frustration. A researcher hunches over a desk, a single fragment of clay under a harsh lamp, squinting at microscopic wedge marks. Beside them sits a database containing thousands of uncatalogued, grainy scans. The human brain, brilliant as it is, simply cannot hold the entire fragmented landscape of Mesopotamian history in its working memory. We have reached the limits of human capacity. We need a partner that doesn't just read. It needs to see patterns in a chaotic. This is where artificial intelligence enters the story. Not as a science fiction novelist dreaming up myths, but as a pattern recognition engine of unprecedented scale. We aren't asking AI to guess history. We're feeding it the hard data. High-resolution scans, existing transcriptions, linguistic structures, and centuries of scholarly analysis. Think of an Assyriologist who has spent their life memorizing the distinct handwriting of ancient scribes. They might catch a flash of recognition when seeing a specific phrase in a fragment. AI can replicate that spark, but it can perform it across 500,000 tablets simultaneously. It excels at the tasks that drain human energy, recognizing faint symbols, proposing translations based on linguistic probability, and most impressively, identifying which fragments belong to the same original tablet. It can virtually reconstruct a shattered artifact before a conservator even touches it. We must be clear, AI does not replace the scholar. It is not an alternative to the expert. It is the ultimate scientific instrument. Just as the telescope allowed astronomers to see stars invisible to the naked eye, AI acts as a digital microscope for the past. It highlights connections, identifies stylistic links, and flags anomalies that the human eye would inevitably miss due to pure fatigue. Visualize a 3D scanned clay fragment floating in a digital workspace. The AI highlights the faint indentations, then, in a blink, snaps a second distant fragment into place to complete the missing text. A researcher watches, verifying the logic, amazed at a connection that had been hidden for 5 millennia. The revolution isn't about automating history. It is about finally letting the voices trapped in these broken shards speak again. We aren't just reading text. We are restoring the lost narrative of human origin. For centuries, the greatest tragedy of Mesopotamian archaeology hasn't been the loss of the tablets themselves, but the agonizing silence of their gaps. A tablet is rarely perfect. It is an artifact of trauma. A line of text might be missing a crucial symbol. A paragraph could be severed right at the climax of a royal decree, or a tablet might be shattered exactly where the most vital information resides. For generations, scholars relied on a mix of grammatical structure, historical context, and educated guesswork to fill in the blanks. It was a slow, exhausting, and inherently subjective process, always shadowed by the doubt of human error. But now, we are witnessing a paradigm shift. We are transforming the impossible task of reconstructing a lost language into the realm of computational probability. Think of how your modern smartphone predicts the next word in your text message. AI models trained on thousands of known Akkadian, Babylonian, and Sumerian texts are now doing the same, on a far more sophisticated level. They analyze the cadence of an ancient dialect, the standard legal phrasing of a contract, or the poetic structure of an epic. When the AI encounters a gap in a tablet, it doesn't just guess, it calculates. It analyzes the shattered fragments and suggests the most statistically probable characters or words that once occupied that space. An empty gap on a piece of clay is no longer an absolute silence. It has become a question of probability. The AI does not proclaim this is definitively the word. Instead, it offers a window of possibility. Based on the syntax of 10,000 similar records, these are the 3 most likely sequences that complete this sentence. This is the moment when the dead half of our history begins to find its voice again. It is not magic, and it is not revisionist history. It is the result of the machine learning the heartbeat of a language that had been silent for millennia. We're essentially teaching a computer to read the context of a void. As these suggestions emerge, we see the jagged edges of broken history start to smooth over, revealing coherent thoughts that had been locked away in darkness for 5,000 years. Beyond individual tablets lies a far more ambitious challenge: the reconstruction of a shattered global archive. Many of these artifacts were unearthed during the chaotic excavations of the 19th and early 20th centuries. In the rush, fragments were scattered across the globe. Today, 1/2 of a Babylonian judicial record might reside in a climate-controlled vault in London, while its matching half sits in a dusty box in a Berlin basement, and a third piece rests in a private collection in Baghdad. For over 100 years, these fragments have been treated as separate, unrelated items. Human researchers, even the most brilliant among them, simply cannot remember every detail of every fragment across every museum on Earth. Enter the AI, acting as the lead detective in the world's longest-running cold case. By comparing the physical geometry, the specific style of the cuneiform wedges, the chemical composition of the clay, and the linguistic flow, the AI can propose matches that no human eye would ever suspect. It can identify that a shard in Istanbul is the perfect structural partner to a fragment in Chicago. Imagine the breakthrough. A researcher clicks a button, and suddenly 2 pieces of a clay puzzle separated by an ocean and a century of history snap together in a 3D digital workspace. The text flows across the seam, completing a thought, a law, or a myth that has been torn in half since the fall of an empire. That singular realization can change everything. A few missing lines of text might be the difference between understanding a king's intent or misinterpreting a religious ritual. It alters the trajectory of our historical understanding. This is the ultimate power of AI in archaeology. It is not just about reading a single tablet. It is about building a network. It connects the disparate, lonely fragments into a coherent, massive library of human experience. We are no longer dealing with isolated finds. We're stitching the fabric of a civilization back together, piece by piece, across borders and time zones. And as these puzzles are solved, a new reality begins to emerge. Reading the text was only the first layer. When thousands of these tablets are linked, indexed, and aligned, we stop looking at mere stone. We start looking at a complex functioning society. The silent library is finally beginning to speak, and it has 1,000,000 stories to tell. We often make the mistake of viewing the ancient world solely through the eyes of the elite. When we think of Mesopotamia, our minds drift to epic poems of gods, the monuments of kings, and the bloody chronicles of conquest. Yet, the vast majority of those 500,000 clay tablets are not grand declarations of power. They are the mundane, messy records of everyday life. They are receipts for grain, records of debt, marriage contracts, property disputes, and letters between merchants across the plains. These are the receipts of a society that was remarkably human. When AI begins to process this massive, unrefined data, we aren't just uncovering royal lineage, we're uncovering the people. We find the tenant farmer struggling under the weight of debt, the temple worker counting daily rations, the merchant tracking shipments of silver, and the mother documenting her family's inheritance. This is a fundamental shift in perspective. Historically, our understanding of the ancient world was a top-down narrative, trickling from the throne room to the public square, but with AI's ability to ingest and synthesize thousands of these boring administrative documents, we're finally witnessing a bottom-up history. We're no longer limited to the propaganda of kings, we're reading the lived experience of the common citizen. Imagine a bustling scene, the sun setting over the ziggurat, a local market filled with the clamour of trade, a scribe meticulously recording a silver transaction, and a family pleading their case before a local judge. These are the snapshots that fill the archives. By amplifying the voices of the merchant, the worker, and the farmer, AI transforms a collection of dry administrative clay into a vivid, breathing narrative of human struggle and enterprise. It is a correction of history's lens, proving that a civilization is defined not just by its rulers, but by the relentless daily activity of its people. This is where the project transcends simple translation. We're moving from reading the text to mapping the society. When we feed tens of thousands of administrative documents into a neural network, we stop looking at individual stories and start seeing the invisible architecture of an entire civilization. AI allows researchers to map the flow of commodities, the intricate webs of family alliances, and the hidden levers of temple power. We discover that history is often driven not by a king's ego, but by the complex accounting of grain, the shifting burden of tax, and the cold logic of credit. These silent tablets reveal that Mesopotamia possessed an administrative sophistication that rivals our own modern bureaucracy. A king might claim divine right to rule, but the clay tablets tell a different story. They reveal who truly held the land, who controlled the harvest, and which families cemented their power over generations through strategic debt and ownership. AI doesn't just read the words, it builds the map of power. It overlays thousands of contracts to visualize how wealth moved through the hands of the elite and the struggles of the dispossessed. We are seeing a version of the ancient world that is more grounded, more mechanical, and more relatable than anything we have ever imagined. The AI turns data points into a living geography of human society. It uncovers the systems that actually held these empires together long after their kings had turned to dust. But this leads us to the final, haunting question. If AI is so powerful and the data is so plentiful, why haven't we solved the past entirely? The answer lies in the limitations of the technology itself and the boundaries of what we can truly know about the human heart from 5 millennia ago. We must approach this technological revolution with a sharp dose of humility. While AI is a powerful assistant, it is not an oracle. It can scan, suggest, and reconstruct, but it can also be profoundly dangerously wrong. In the study of ancient languages, the margin for error is razor-thin. A single misplaced wedge, a tiny indentation in the clay, can be the difference between a king's decree and a merchant's receipt. A character can function as a proper noun, a verb, or a geographical marker depending entirely on the scribal context. AI is prone to what researchers call hallucinations. It can confidently propose a reconstruction that is grammatically elegant but historically impossible. This is why the human element is non-negotiable. Every piece of data suggested by the machine must be subjected to the rigorous gaze of an Assyriologist, checked against syntax, chronological context, archaeological provenance, and the nuance of ancient cultural idioms. The goal here is not to replace the human expert, but to augment them. The most remarkable result of this partnership isn't that the computer does the work for us. It is that the computer allows us to do the work at a scale previously unimaginable. It filters out the noise, highlights the high probability patterns, and presents a menu of options for the human eye to verify. It is a safeguard, not a replacement. We use the AI to manage the ocean of data, but the human expert remains the final judge of truth. As the database grows, as more tablets are scanned, metadata tagged, and integrated into a global neural network, we are moving toward a groundbreaking achievement, a living map of ancient Mesopotamia. Imagine it, a digital interface where you can track the movement of goods across thousands of years. You can watch trade routes solidify, see how legal codes evolved from city-state to empire, and observe how myths traveled through time, morphing as they moved from Sumer to Babylon. After 5,000 years of silence, these tablets are finally beginning to whisper in unison. Those tiny, jagged inscriptions, once isolated in dusty crates, are stitching together a massive, high-definition portrait of the birth of urban life, law, and administrative statehood. The cinema of it is breathtaking. We see thousands of clay tablets lighting up on a map of the ancient Fertile Crescent. Lines of connection arc across cities. Ziggurats light up as the data centers of the ancient world. We aren't just reading fragments anymore. We are seeing a society function in real time. This is the power of systemic digital history. It is a window into the machinery of human organization, how we first learned to count, to own, to tax, and to tell our stories. For 5 millennia, these tablets sat in the dark. They didn't vanish, they didn't burn, and they didn't lose their meaning. They were simply waiting for the right audience. They were too numerous, too fragile, and too complex for any group of scholars, no matter how dedicated, to decode in a single lifetime. AI does not make them more mysterious. It does the opposite. It pulls them out of the shadows, one wedge, one fragment, one sentence at a time. The most jarring realization is that these texts do not hide a single Da Vinci Code secret. Instead, they reveal hundreds of thousands of small, granular truths about how the very first civilization operated. We are not just recovering a lost epic, we are recovering our collective memory. Perhaps these tablets were never truly silent. They were merely speaking a language that humanity had almost entirely forgotten how to hear. And now, for the first time, our own tools are helping us tune into that frequency again. The past is no longer locked in the mud, it is being transcribed into the light. If AI can finally read the hundreds of thousands of tablets that have remained untranslated, what do you think we will discover that changes history the most? Will it be the true motivations of the ancient kings, the origins of our legal systems, or the intimate, everyday lives of the first people to ever live in a city? The conversation is only just beginning.